Right now we're standing on the roof of the upper room where Jesus spent the last few moments with his disciples. It says he so longed for this last Passover feast. It's been fun for me to be with you here in Israel, walking where Jesus walked. As we looked at this study, what does it mean to walk as Jesus walked? One of the things I really wanted to point out in conclusion as we look at the life of Christ, a study through his life chronologically. And this has been my love for over 35 years, studying the life of Christ and then trying to document what were the foundational priorities in Jesus' life. What does it mean to walk as Jesus walked? And if you remember, we use that acronym, Holy Spirit Power. And we started at the beginning of his ministry in the wilderness where we talked about Holy Spirit dependence, and then prayerful guidance. And then the O stood for obedient living. W stood for word-centered focus. E stood for exalting the Lord, and R stood for relationships and investing in a few. We saw that right in the very first part of Jesus' ministry where he's led by the Spirit into the wilderness, led by the Spirit of God for 40 days in the wilderness. He prayed. He was obedient to his Father, not taking shortcuts. He quoted the word to Satan when Satan tempted him. He exalted his Father, and then out of there came and called his disciples and said, "Come and see." So at the very beginning of his ministry, in Matthew 4 and John 1, you find that Holy Spirit power being lived out as values, foundational priorities. Well, here I am right now above the upper room where Jesus spent the very last day of his life here on earth with his disciples before he went to the Garden of Gethsemane and then was crucified. And I want you to notice also in that upper room discourse, John 13 to 17, you still can see these foundational priorities. You read through that 4 or 5 chapters and you see in John 14 and John 16, the whole role of the Holy Spirit. Jesus said, "It's good that I go away so that I can send you another counselor, that wonderful counselor who can be your friend just as I was a friend of the disciples." We see that Holy Spirit dependence in John 14 and John 16. You see prayer in John 17 where he prays for his disciples and he prays for you and I. All of John 17, a very intimate prayer that we see in Jesus' life. We look at obedience 5 times in the upper room discourse. Jesus said, "If you love me, you'll obey my commands. Just as I do only what pleases the Father, you too need to obey." Then we see the word where he says, "If you remain in my word and my words remain in you, then you will bear fruit, more fruit and much fruit." See the word-centered focus. You see Jesus in the upper room always exalting his Father. Say, "I only want to please him. I only want to glorify him." In John 17, he said, "Father, it's time to glorify your Son just as I glorified you." He was always exalting his Father. And then the relational part of it. You see Jesus longing to be with the disciples for that last meal. He gets down and washes their feet and spends time with them. You see that Holy Spirit power lived out at the beginning of Jesus' ministry and at the end of Jesus' ministry. You see, it's been my prayer that as we've been over here in Israel and trying to guide you into a discussion of what does it mean to walk as Jesus walked, that now you'll have a fresh new love for the life of Christ and a fresh new love for studying Jesus. Because the beautiful thing about Jesus is he's a very deep well. I was the first in my family of 16 children to come to know Christ. When I went off to Bible school, a professor challenged me to look at the life of Christ chronologically. And that began over 35, 40 years ago, a study of Jesus' life. And you know, I tire of all the different seminars I taught, but I never tire of studying Jesus. Because we're told we're to think and act just like Jesus. That we can walk as Jesus walked. We can do what Jesus did. We can do greater things than Jesus did if we walk as he walked. Where Jesus had 4 years to make disciples, we can, by God's grace, have 40 years to impart our lives to others, to walk as he walked, to bear fruit, more fruit, and much fruit. My challenge to you, if this study has been helpful, go and find a family member or a couple friends and walk through the study with them. Because I found that as you teach something, you learn it. And as you give these truths away to others, it'll go deeper and deeper and deeper in your life. I've gone through this study and walking as Jesus walked so many times. And every time I take others through it, I learn something new. And my love for Jesus continues to grow. And I know will always keep growing as I learn to walk as he walked, doing what he did. May God give you that same joy.